It's terrible that after 50 years it is behind closed doors and I had no intention. Now I started to stop. Now I'm determined to put an end to this terrible. 7 minutes ago, inside a room normally reserved for moments of royal unity, Princess Anne stepped forward carrying a velvet case that no one expected to see. Catherine remained motionless as the king watched from only a few feet away. Then Anne announced the decision that instantly changed the balance of power. And across the room, Camilla's controlled expression shattered before everyone present. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew the gathering inside Windsor Castle's white drawing room was arranged in secrecy. Camilla, Catherine, William, and music, and senior household officials entered without knowing why. That silence mattered because the room normally projected unity, not division. Yet, the monarch had approved a decision that would redefine who carried influence beside him and who would help secure the crown's future. And opened the velvet case and named Catherine holder of the monarch's honor. The fictional royal appointment marked its recipient as the sovereign's most trusted female representative in ceremonial leadership, family coordination, and continuity between one reign and the next. It was not decorative. Music. It gave the princess precedence at ceremonies, authority during sensitive occasions, and a direct role in preparing the institution for William's reign. Catherine lowered her eyes instead of smiling. She felt the weight immediately because accepting the honor placed her inside a struggle she had spent years avoiding. Camilla believed her position beside Charles made her the dominant female presence within the household. Now the younger woman was receiving responsibilities that reached beyond ceremony and into the monarchy's future. And fastened the silver and blue insignia onto Catherine's dress. Camilla shoved her chair backwards so sharply that one leg scraped across the floor. The king turned toward her, but she refused to meet his eyes. William remained still, watching his wife absorb a triumph that felt dangerously close to becoming a family wound. Music. Camilla demanded to know whether the decision had been made before she entered. No one answered. That silence confirmed everything. Charles and William had discussed the elevation without her. A sealed document beside the monarch listed the honor's duties, and one passage reduced the queen consort's ceremonial influence. Music. Camilla warned and that no medal, title, or private arrangement music could erase the place she had earned beside the king. The Princess Royal answered calmly that the honor had not been created to erase anyone. It had been created because the monarchy could no longer afford uncertainty. But to understand why Camilla experienced Catherine's elevation as a personal betrayal, the palace first had to confront what each woman believed she was entitled to protect. Music. The room had witnessed a royal announcement, but the royal story was written across 3 faces. Catherine carried the burden of a future she had not yet inherited. And carried the certainty of someone who believed duty must outweigh affection. And Camilla carried something more dangerous than anger. The conviction that the family she had fought to enter was now quietly preparing to move beyond her. Catherine had learned that patience was not simply expected of her. It was the foundation of her place within the royal family. As William's wife and a future queen, she had spent years preparing for greater responsibility without ever appearing eager to claim it. The monarch's honor now forced that hidden preparation into the open. The distinction was meant to protect ceremonial leadership and the transition between reigns, but to her it felt less like recognition and more like a burden placed directly over an old family wound. William found her moments after the gathering and music closed the door behind him. Catherine told the prince that she did not feel victorious. She felt guilty. The honor had raised her position, yet it had also exposed Camilla's fear of being replaced. He reminded his wife that Anne had not created the role as a reward. She had resisted it for weeks, believing another title might deepen the rivalry until delayed decisions and competing loyalties around Charles convinced her that the monarchy needed a clear line of responsibility. Music. Camilla returned to her private sitting room and removed one glove finger by finger. She placed it beside an untouched cup of tea, then stared at the empty chair opposite her. When an aide quietly asked whether the evening schedule should be cancelled. Music. The queen consort answered without looking up. No, they will not watch me disappear. Her anger had not faded, but beneath it sat a deeper pain. She had fought for years to stand beside the king. And now the family seemed to be preparing for a future in which her influence no longer mattered, and remained behind with the empty velvet case in her hands. For one brief moment doubt reached her. The Princess Royal knew Camilla would see the decision as rejection. Yet she also knew hesitation could leave William and Catherine exposed when the next reign began. Charles had once considered giving his wife a consultative role connected to the honor, but Anne had removed that provision. She believed marital influence could not be allowed to shape a safeguard designed to protect the crown. Catherine finally asked what had changed Anne's mind. William hesitated before answering. One ceremony, he admitted, had become the point of no return. That forgotten ceremony had lasted less than an hour, but one sentence spoken afterward set Anne on the path toward the decision that exploded inside Windsor. Weeks before Catherine received the monarch's honor, the royal family gathered for what should have been a carefully controlled remembrance service. The cameras captured dignity, polished smiles, and perfect order. Behind the doors, however, a confrontation over a single place in the procession exposed a struggle far deeper than protocol and gave Anne the exact reason she needed to intervene. Catherine stood ready beside William as palace planners checked the final order for the Commonwealth Remembrance Service at St. George's Chapel. The fictional ceremony was designed to honor shared sacrifice across the Commonwealth. Music. While the procession placed each royal according to duty, rank, and the monarchy's future direction. Her position beside the prince mattered because they represented the next reign, not merely another married couple attending a family event. Music. Camilla changed everything. Minutes before departure, she instructed the senior equerry, the official responsible for coordinating royal movement and ceremonial arrangements, Music, to move Catherine 2 places backwards and place her beside Charles instead. The queen consort insisted that the sovereign's wife could never appear secondary to the heir's wife. Her demand was delivered quietly, but it carried the force of someone certain that no one would challenge her so close to the service. Catherine received the alteration while standing in the corridor with her gloves already fastened. She did not protest. She stepped back because creating a scene would have damaged the dignity of the occasion and embarrassed the king before the public. William saw the change immediately. His jaw tightened and he chose silence only because his wife asked him not to turn the procession into a family confrontation. And noticed both reactions. The Princess Royal watched Catherine accept the humiliation music, and saw the future king struggle to contain his anger. That restraint troubled her more than an argument would have. It showed that Camilla's personal wishes could override an approved plan while everyone else carried the emotional cost. And confronted her after the service in the dean's cloister away from cameras and aides. Camilla defended the change and said, "The future can wait its turn." She answered without hesitation that the future had already waited long enough. A documented account written by the equerry later confirmed that the instruction had contradicted the ceremonial plan signed by the king's office. Charles admitted in a private recorded conversation with Anne that he knew the order had been altered, yet refused to reverse it because he feared an argument before the service. Charles reread that account alone that evening and set it down without speaking. The monarch could no longer defend decisions shaped by fear, and understood the danger clearly, and began creating an honor that would place Catherine's future role beyond sudden interference. When Camilla finally discovered that one corridor confrontation had inspired the honor now resting on Catherine's shoulder, restraint gave way to fury. The ceremony had ended. The officials had withdrawn and the heavy doors were almost closed when Camilla turned back. Music. She did not approach Catherine. She did not appeal to Charles. Instead, she followed and into the adjoining library and demanded the truth. What began as a controlled question became the fiercest private confrontation either woman had allowed herself in years. And entered carrying the ceremonial papers and moved toward a secure dispatch box, the locked case used for sensitive royal documents. Camilla slipped inside before the door closed and told the footmen outside that no one was to enter. Their relationship had always survived through discipline rather than warmth. The Princess Royal had accepted her as the king's wife, while the queen consort had long known and was the one woman she could neither charm nor pressure. Camilla asked whether the monarch's honor had been created to humiliate her, and placed the box on the table and answered that humiliation had not been necessary. Her own actions had already exposed the problem. The words landed hard. She accused the princess of turning Catherine into a weapon and using duty as an excuse to push her aside. Camilla's voice cracked music, as she spoke of the years she had stood beside Charles when others kept their distance. She had carried public anger, private doubt, and the weight of being treated as an outsider. Now she said that loyalty was being repaid with replacement, and listened without interrupting, but she did not retreat. Music, and opened the box and removed the equerry's documented account. She slid it across the table. Music. Camilla read the passage describing how she had changed the procession order against the approved plan. Halfway down the page, her hands began to shake. She folded the paper closed, but the words had already done their damage and then revealed the truth she had hoped to avoid. Charles had authorized the honor only after seeing evidence of 3 separate occasions. When Camilla's private instructions overruled approved household decisions, the king had not merely accepted Catherine's elevation. He had supplied part of the record that justified it. Camilla stared at her, stunned. Anger gave way to betrayal. Anne's voice softened for the first time as she admitted she understood what it meant to serve for years without receiving the emotional recognition one expected. But pain, she said, could never become authority. Camilla took the copied account and left without another word. She moved straight toward Charles's private office, carrying proof that the man beside her had helped build the case against her, and had delivered the evidence. But only the king could explain why he had chosen the future of the crown over the woman seated beside him. Camilla entered the king's office, expecting denial, apology, or perhaps an admission that Anne had gone too far. Instead, music. Charles was standing beside the window with the authorization document already open on his desk. His signature appeared beneath Catherine's new honor in dark ink, unmistakable and final. In that instant, Camilla understood that and had not seized control. The king had surrendered it willingly. Charles turned as she approached, but he did not close the file. The monarch's honor only carried force because the sovereign had signed its warrant and approved it under the royal seal, the formal mark confirming that a decision came directly from the crown, and had designed the responsibilities, yet his name had made them real. Camilla placed the equerry's account on the desk and asked whether he had given it to his sister. The king removed his glasses and folded them slowly. He admitted that he had avoiding the problem. He said had stopped being kindness and become weakness. Camilla reminded him of every year she had defended his choices while the country doubted him. She had stood beside him through criticism, rejection, and public anger. Now the palace seemed to remember every controversy attached to her, while forgetting every sacrifice she had made for his reign. Her voice remained controlled, but the pain beneath it was impossible to hide. Charles listened without interrupting. He told her the decision was not a judgment on their marriage. It created a boundary between private devotion and constitutional duty, meaning the responsibility to protect the monarchy beyond personal relationships. The warrant defined Catherine's role as service rather than rank. Music. She would protect ceremonial order, guide family representation, and stop personal wishes from disrupting the transition to William's future reign. Camilla noticed a deleted paragraph in an earlier draft. It had offered her shared oversight of family ceremonies. The monarch admitted and had removed it, and he had agreed. Shared authority, he said, would only rebuild the same conflict under another name. Charles then revealed more. William had supported the honor only after demanding that it never be used to attack Camilla publicly. Catherine had also asked for the announcement to remain private until the household understood its purpose. Neither had sought her humiliation. Camilla searched his face for hesitation. None came. The king placed his pen beside the signed warrant and said he would not revoke, weaken, or delay the appointment. His voice was quiet, but the decision was absolute. Camilla left and found the first consequence waiting outside. The next morning's household briefing had been reassigned, and Catherine would sit in the chair once reserved for her. The honor had been created in private, but by sunrise its consequences were already reshaping rooms, schedules, and loyalties throughout the palace. By the next morning, the palace did not need an announcement to understand that something had changed. A chair had been moved. A folder carried a different name. Senior aides stood in unfamiliar positions around the briefing table. Then Camilla entered and saw Catherine seated beside the king's empty place, wearing no crown and making no display, yet holding the authority the entire room could feel. Catherine kept her hands still as the first household briefing began. The meeting covered autumn engagements, remembrance events, music, and which senior royals would represent Charles while his schedule remained limited. Under the monarch's honor, she now chaired discussions about ceremonial continuity whenever the sovereign was absent. Music. The role meant protecting order between the current reign and William's future one, a responsibility Camilla had previously exercised music, through informal influence. Camilla stopped when she saw her usual chair shifted to the side of the table. She touched its wooden back but did not sit. Catherine quietly asked whether she would prefer the seat nearer the window. The offer was respectful, almost gentle. Yet that kindness deepened the queen consort's frustration. There was no insult to challenge and no open cruelty to condemn, only a new arrangement everyone had already accepted. William watched from across the table, guarding every reaction. The prince wanted to protect his wife, but he knew a visible display of triumph would turn a difficult transition into a lasting family war. Catherine understood the same danger. She spoke carefully, acknowledged Camilla's experience music, and continued leading without surrendering the authority Charles had given her. A senior courtier opened the briefing folder and confirmed the next change. Catherine would lead the upcoming state memorial rehearsal and approve the final family procession plan. The decision carried painful weight because procession order had caused the earlier confrontation. Now the very area Camilla had tried to control had been placed beyond her reach. Camilla received another blow before the meeting ended. 3 instructions issued from her office the previous evening had been temporarily suspended. The courtier explained that they now required review by the holder of the honor. She said nothing, but her face hardened as each ordinary sentence stripped away another piece of influence. Camilla remained after everyone left. She finally lowered herself into the shifted chair and stared toward the place Catherine had occupied. Her authority had not disappeared through one dramatic command. It was being removed through folders, seating plans, and decisions that no longer passed through her hands. Camilla rose and requested a private meeting with Catherine. No Charles, no William, no, and not even an aide. Music. For the first time since the honor was bestowed, the conflict would no longer be carried through documents or ceremonies. Music. The 2 women would have to face each other alone. There were no officials in the room. No husbands ready to intervene and no ceremonial language to hide behind. Catherine arrived first and stood beside the fireplace, uncertain whether Camilla intended to threaten, plead, music, or accuse. When the queen consort entered, however, she carried nothing except the insignia's presentation card and a question that stripped away every layer of palace formality. Camilla closed the door herself. The private meeting at Clarence House would leave no written record, and no aide would wait nearby to soften what followed. Catherine understood that the monarch's honor would fail if it became a weapon of revenge. The distinction gave her authority over ceremonial continuity, but that authority would mean nothing if it deepened the family's division. The older woman faced a different danger. Open resistance could isolate her from Charles and damage what remained between her and William's family. Camilla placed the card on the table and asked one question. Did Catherine want the honor? The princess answered without hesitation. She wanted clarity, not victory. She would have preferred that clarity without causing another woman pain, but she would not pretend the monarchy could continue without firm boundaries. Camilla's control finally cracked. She admitted that watching and fasten the insignia had awakened every fear she had carried for years. She had always suspected that she was temporary, accepted only until the family found someone easier to admire. Catherine listened, but she refused to apologize for accepting responsibility. Catherine told her she had no intention of erasing her marriage, her service, or her place beside Charles. Personal belonging and institutional control were not the same. One came from love and history. The other came from duty, rules, and the need to protect the crown from private pressure. Camilla reached for the presentation card, then stopped. She pushed it back across the table and promised music. She would not challenge the honor again, provided it was never used to humiliate her before the public. Music. Catherine then revealed something Camilla had not expected. In a documented exchange with and before the ceremony, music. She had personally asked that the Queen Consort retain leadership of her work involving literacy, domestic support, and older people. The honor reduced her palace authority, but it did not erase her public contribution. Camilla's expression softened for the first time. Catherine had protected part of her work, even while accepting the role that limited her influence. Their peace was fragile, but it was real. Then the news reached them. Music. Details of the Windsor ceremony had already escaped the palace, and one photograph was about to define everything. Music. Inside the room, two women reached a difficult peace. Outside the palace gates, the world was preparing to turn that private settlement into a national spectacle. By midday, the private honor was private no longer. A single photograph appeared across television screens and newspaper websites, and fastening the insignia onto Catherine while Charles watched and Camilla sat rigidly in the background. It contained no argument, no raised voice, music, and no explanation. Yet, the distance between the women told the public everything it believed it needed to know. Palace communications confirmed that Catherine had received the monarch's honor, describing it as recognition of her growing responsibility and her role in protecting continuity across the royal family. The honor was a formal mark of trust, giving its holder greater ceremonial leadership and a stronger voice in preparing the monarchy for the next reign. The statement avoided any mention of Camilla's reduced authority, but journalists quickly connected it to the changed procession plans, the reassigned household briefing, and the new power now resting with the princess. The London Chronicle captured the mood with one brutal headline: "The future takes her place." The front page carried the Windsor photograph above a smaller image of Camilla leaving separately tense and unsmiling. In a single layout, the paper turned a private family decision into a national drama about succession, loyalty, and loss. Outside Buckingham Palace, umbrellas gathered beneath the rain as people read the announcement on their phones. One woman raised a handwritten sign declaring, "Duty has a new face." Another argued that the Queen Consort had been humiliated after years of standing beside Charles. Public sympathy split immediately. Catherine's supporters saw discipline, stability, and long-delayed recognition. Camilla's defenders saw service dismissed in one carefully staged moment, and then became part of the story herself. A broadcaster revealed through a recorded palace briefing that the Princess Royal had personally requested the photograph's release. She wanted the transition presented openly, not buried beneath whispers that could make the decision seem secretive or illegitimate. Catherine watched the coverage beside William, and grew distressed when commentators described her as having defeated Camilla. The prince reminded his wife that she could not control the story others chose to tell. She could only control the character she displayed once the cameras moved closer. Camilla saw the same front page alone in her car before an engagement. She folded the newspaper once, steadied herself, and stepped out to greet the waiting public rather than cancel. Music. Her choice did not erase the pain, but it proved she would not disappear. The family now faced one final test. The next state ceremony would either expose their division or prove the new order had truly been accepted. The honor had survived anger, confrontation, and public judgment. But its true meaning would only be settled when the royal family stood together again before the nation. The final verdict did not come through another document or another private argument. It came days later as the royal family assembled for the state memorial rehearsal that had once triggered the crisis. The same corridor, the same order of procession, and the same women stood at the center of it. Music. This time, no one moved Catherine backwards, and Camilla made the decision that ended the conflict herself. Catherine arrived, carrying the approved procession plan beneath the authority of the monarch's honor. The distinction now made her an active guardian of ceremonial continuity, trusted to protect the transition between Charles's reign and William's future one. Her place beside the prince represented responsibility for what came next, while Camilla's position beside the king recognized the marriage, service, and loyalty that still belonged to the present, and watched from the side and understood the true weight of the moment. The honor had never been created to crown a winner or humiliate a rival. It existed to build boundaries strong enough to stop private emotion from controlling royal duty. She had forced the family to face that truth, but she also knew the correction had carried a painful human cost. A ceremonial officer hesitated before directing Catherine toward her assigned position. Camilla stepped forward first. She gently took the younger woman by the arm, guided her beside William, and then returned to Charles. No speech followed. No apology was demanded. Catherine thanked her quietly. Camilla answered that the procession should begin on time. The words sounded formal, but the gesture carried everything she could not say. She had accepted the authority she once fought, not because her pain had vanished, but because she finally understood that Catherine's rise did not require her own destruction. Charles watched both women and released the tension he had carried since signing the warrant. The monarch now understood that protecting his wife did not mean holding back the future. Preparing Catherine for greater responsibility did not mean erasing Camilla's place beside him, and later returned the equerry's original account to the archive. In a documented handwritten note, she declared that the crisis ended when service was separated from possession. The file was sealed as a record of correction, not punishment. Music. Camilla suffered loss but not erasure. Catherine received power but not personal triumph, and restored order while accepting the pain required to do it. Music. The family did not emerge untouched, but it emerged settled. The procession moved forward with Catherine in her rightful place. Camilla beside the man she had chosen, and in watching the crown finally placed duty above fear, bringing the conflict and the question of authority to a definitive end. Thanks for watching.